Have you ever felt lately that you are lonelier than before? Not exactly because no one calls, not exactly because your children or grandchildren no longer care, but it is a vague feeling, as if life is slowly leaving you behind, even though you are still here in the familiar house, still doing the familiar things every day. Many people say that old age naturally comes with silence. That loneliness is just a part of time's rules. But have you ever wondered, why do some elderly people live so joyfully? Their children and grandchildren still gather around, friends still visit, and their eyes still sparkle as they did in their youth. Then there are others, perhaps you or someone close to you, who grow quieter, sadder, feeling like the connections around them are fading away. What is really happening? The truth is, it is not just about age. It is not just because we slow down or grow weaker. It is also because of small habits, silent and repetitive, that day by day distance us from the world. And the scariest part is, we often do not realize it until it is too late. You might think you're just living normally, but in reality, those normal things, like a soft complaint, a shake of the head at a smartphone, or declining an invitation to meet up, are the seeds of isolation and sadness later on. In today's video, I want to explore with you 8 silent habits that many elderly people fall into, which gradually make them isolated, disconnected from family, friends, and even the joy of living. These are things no one tells you directly, perhaps because they do not want to upset you, or because they themselves do not realize it. But if you stay until the end of this video, I believe you will not only recognize these habits, but also find ways to change, to rediscover the warmth, joy, and connections you deserve. Some things on this list might surprise you. Others might make you pause because they feel too familiar. But remember, recognizing what is happening is the first step to change. So, if you are at retirement age or caring for your grandparents or parents, please take a few minutes for this video. It is not just for the elderly. It is for anyone who wants to live happily, no matter their age. If this topic resonates with you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss future valuable insights. And if you are thinking of a loved one who might need to hear this, share the video with them. Sometimes, a small action can change an entire life. Now, let us begin exploring the 8 silent habits that quietly steal away a happy old age. Habit 1. Becoming overly negative and critical. People often say, Mr. Raymond is hard to approach. Living in the neighborhood for over 20 years, only a few neighbors have sat with him long enough to truly understand him. Every morning, he sits on the bench in front of his porch, holding a cup of coffee that slowly cools. Anyone passing by might hear him mutter, "Kids these days do not even know how to greet people. Those new cars are so noisy and good for nothing. Back in my day, people lived with more decency." It sounds so familiar that people start avoiding that street in the mornings. But few know that Mr. Raymond was once the most cheerful man in his extended family. He was a teacher, inspiring his students, the best storyteller at every family gathering. But after his wife passed away and he retired, his son got busy, his grandchildren grew up with technology, and he slowly lost his place in conversations. Gradually, no one asked for his opinions anymore. No one needed his advice on parenting or life. When he spoke, his son smiled politely. His grandchildren nodded, but forgot what he said. The feeling of being overlooked hurt him more than loneliness itself. And so, he began to protect himself with a shell of criticism, grumbling, and distance. It was his way of proving, I still see everything. I am still here. What he did not realize was that those complaints were building a wall, not a wall of protection, but a wall of separation between him and everything he longed for: attention, understanding, and love. No one said anything, but his son started calling less. His grandchildren stopped dropping by in the afternoons. People began to find him difficult to talk to, not because they did not love him, but because every time they got close, they felt judged or criticized. Old age does not make anyone negative, but unhealed pain, combined with prolonged silence, does. No one wants to become a complainer, but sometimes, without realizing it, people start using words to express their sense of loss, not because they hate life, but because they are terrified of being forgotten. If you see a bit of Mr. Raymond in yourself sometimes, do not rush to blame yourself. Instead, try asking, when was the last time I said something that made someone happy? Am I longing for someone to listen, but accidentally pushing them away with complaints? You do not need to be cheerful all the time, but you can choose words that make it easier for others to approach you. It can start with simple things. You look so different today, grandkid. Must be something exciting. Thank you for calling. Hearing your voice makes my day lighter. No one is asking you to change who you are, but a small shift in how you speak can open a new path, one that brings people closer to you again. And who knows, along that path, you might rediscover yourself, the gentle, loving person so many once cherished. Habit 2, neglecting appearance. When was the last time you looked in the mirror, not to check how much your hair is grayed or how many new wrinkles you have, but to smile and say to yourself, today, I am still okay. I am still me? Many elderly people cannot answer that question, not because they forgot, but because it has been so long since they thought they needed to care for themselves. We often think appearance is for the young. Once you retire, once your children and grandchildren are grown, when there is no one left to impress, why bother dressing nicely? Why bother grooming? Why bother staying in shape? And from those thoughts, people start wearing old, baggy clothes because they are more comfortable. They avoid haircuts, skip a touch of lipstick, hesitate to wear new shoes. They stay home more, wear pajamas all day, and gradually stop leaving the house. But few realize that the way we treat our appearance is the way we tell ourselves, am I still important? And sadly, the answer slowly becomes no. When you stop caring about how you look, you are subtly telling yourself and the world that you no longer want to show up, no longer want to be seen. And then, just as you expect, you become invisible in others' eyes, not because they do not care, but because you have withdrawn from shared life, starting with the quiet choice of what to wear each day. Taking care of yourself is not about vanity. It is an act of self-respect. It is a reminder that I am still a person of value no matter my age. Did you know that just wearing a shirt you like or adding a bit of color to your lips can make people feel easier about approaching you? The positive energy you radiate invites others to bring positivity to you. It does not require elaborate makeup or fancy clothes. It just means choosing to show up for yourself, choosing to be neat, clean, and to step out of your bedroom with the mindset, today, I am still good, still worth living. If you are hearing this and thinking, but I am old, who cares anymore? The answer is, you should be the first to care. When you start loving your reflection again, you also begin to summon back the vibrant parts inside you that time has dusted over. And from there, you do not just feel more beautiful, you feel alive again. I think of Mrs. Maria, a 78-year-old woman living in a small suburban neighborhood. After her husband passed, she lived alone, wearing pajamas all day. Neighbors only saw her when she picked up the mail, her hair messy, her eyes downcast. She said, "Why bother trying? I have no one left." Then one day, her 7-year-old granddaughter Ellie came to visit and whispered, "Grandma, I miss when you wore your hair up with those little earrings, like a fairy in a storybook." "Are you not a fairy anymore?" Mrs. Maria cried after hearing that. But the next day, she brushed her hair, put on an old floral dress that still smelled of cinnamon, applied a touch of lipstick, and smiled at the mirror for the first time in 3 years. She said, "It was not about looking young again. I just wanted Ellie to know her grandma was still here." Habit 3, rejecting technology. But have you noticed something? When we stop caring for our appearance, it is often when we also start rejecting new things, including the ways the world is connecting. Mr. Henry was one such person. After retiring, he moved to live alone in an old house where everything remained as it was in the 1980s. He did not use the internet, did not own a smartphone, and did not receive any messages from his children or grandchildren beyond traditional phone calls. "If they miss me, they will call. If not, I do not need it," he said. But what he did not know was that his children and grandchildren still missed him, still loved him, still talked about him often, just in a family group chat he was never part of. They sent photos, shared funny stories, planned visits to see him, but because he could not respond, they gradually stopped reaching out. No one abandoned him. He just missed the way the world was trying to love him. Technology is not the enemy. It is just a new language that your children and grandchildren use to show their care. When you refuse to learn that language, it is like refusing to hear the love coming closest to you. A message never sent is not due to a lack of feeling, but because the recipient is not ready to receive it. Mr. Henry's granddaughter once said something that stuck with me. "Grandpa does not know how to text, so I do not know how to talk to him anymore." It sounded like an excuse, but it was really a sigh from a child trying to keep her grandfather in her life and not knowing how. No one expects you to become a tech expert. They just want you to learn something small, like how to open a message, view a family photo, or press the video call button on a birthday. That alone is enough to reconnect with a world you thought you had lost. And maybe, as you listen to this, there is a message sitting in your children's or grandchildren's phones, never sent, because they think you would not read it. Habit 4. Holding on to too many possessions. Some messages are never sent, not for lack of love, but because the gap between generations has not yet found a patient bridge builder. But there is another gap, not in phones or social media. It is right in the homes where many elderly people live, walking through every day, rarely noticing how much they have been living with the past. I once visited Mrs. Evelyn, an 82-year-old woman living alone in a third-floor apartment. Every time I stepped into her home, it felt like entering a museum, not because of beauty, but because everything was frozen in the past. She kept everything: yellowed birthday cards, magazines from 1996 she never read, her late husband's clothes still hanging in the closet. Though he had been gone for over a decade, I cannot bear to throw them away because if I do, nothing will remind me that I once lived a meaningful life, she said, and I understood. But what she did not see was that when too many old things fill a small space, there is no room left to live in the present. Mrs. Evelyn did not clean, did not invite anyone over, did not want to move objects around because losing them meant having nothing left. But in truth, by not letting go, she could not receive anything new. No new friends, no new memories, no new experiences. It is like being unable to accept a fresh bouquet if your hands are still holding wilted flowers from last spring. Many people do not realize that holding on to objects is not just about reluctance. Deep down, it is fear. Fear of facing emptiness. Fear that letting go means letting go of a part of themselves. But we do not have to choose between remembering and living. We can do both if we keep what is worth keeping and release what is suffocating us. Start with something small, an item you no longer use, a drawer you have not opened in years. Each thing that leaves is not a loss, but a space you create for something new to enter. You will be surprised to find that the lightness does not come from cleaning, but from living in a space that lets you breathe. And maybe in that moment, you will want to open your door to someone, to let them into your life, which you had closed off for so long because there was just too much stuff. Habit 5. Losing patience with others. A young cashier, about 20, slight and tired-eyed after a nearly 9-hour shift. She was struggling to free a jammed receipt from the machine when a voice snapped behind her, cold and sharp. "What kind of service is this so slow? My legs are tired from standing." Everyone in line turned, a man around 70, face stern, tapping his cane impatiently on the floor as if to emphasize how precious his time was. No one spoke. The girl apologized quietly. The printer jammed again. A soft sigh escaped the old man's throat. We have all seen scenes like this at the supermarket, the bank, the bus stop, or the clinic, and we often sigh quietly, not out of disdain for the elderly, but out of regret. Regret for a respectable person slowly losing respect just because of a few moments of impatience. The older we get, the more precious time feels because there is less of it. But the paradox is, the more we value time, the easier it is to let it control our emotions. Youth waits easily, thinking there is plenty of time to spare. But in old age, when every passing hour carries a sense of loss, people fear wasting it. But fearing wasted time does not justify hurting those sharing that time with you. Impatience in the elderly is not just a temperament. It is a defense against feeling powerless, against no longer being quick or in control. When things do not go as planned, when others are slower than expected, irritation rises like a wave, protecting a fragile sense of self. But if we are not careful, those reactions can turn us into someone unapproachable, someone loved but rarely visited. Impatient people snap at grandchildren for asking the same question twice. They get annoyed with waitstaff for not getting things exactly right. They lose calm in conversations when others do not respond as quickly as hoped, and gradually they retreat. Not because the elderly are not respected, but because they are losing the gentleness that makes old age so lovable and valuable in others' eyes. Impatience also harms the elderly person's own spirit. It creates a constant state of tension. When you are always waiting for something better, faster, or more satisfactory, you lose the ability to enjoy the present. You cannot relax. You cannot find peace. Over time, this deepens isolation, pulling you away from others because everyone is not good enough, does things wrong, or is too bothersome. It is a subtle form of depression disguised as irritability, grumpiness, and judgment. So how do you break free? No one expects the elderly to be endlessly gentle or always pleased. But you can choose to pause before reacting. You can learn to ask yourself one simple question before getting upset. Is this really worth it? Remember, a small smile, a nod of understanding, a quiet, "it is okay," can soothe both you and others. You might think you do not need to do this, but consider, how do you want others to remember you? As someone rich in patience, or someone others feel relieved to leave behind? Patience is beautiful at any age, but in old age, it is not just beautiful, it is a sign of a heart that never runs out of love. Habit 6, talking without listening. There is a silent habit that creeps into the lives of many elderly people without them noticing. The habit of talking too much, but rarely truly listening to others. As we age, we feel we have so much to share. We carry a treasure trove of memories, experiences, and perspectives, believing that sharing them passes down value, keeps us connected to our children and grandchildren, and affirms that we are still here, still meaningful. But by focusing so much on being heard, many people leave no room for others to share their thoughts and feelings. The issue is not in sharing, but in the imbalance of communication. When a conversation tilts too far one way, when one person constantly talks, offers opinions, gives advice, the other person becomes passive. They no longer have a chance to share their experiences, no longer feel heard, no longer feel part of the relationship. Over time, this imbalance leads to a clear outcome. The other person grows quiet, pulls back. Calls from children shorten. Visits become less frequent. Conversations feel awkward, not because they do not love you, but because they cannot find their place in that space. They are no longer asked about, no longer listened to, no longer seen as someone with something to share, and that is when the relationship starts to cool, even if love remains. The sad part is, many elderly people do not see this. They think the distance comes from others. They assume their children are thoughtless, their grandchildren indifferent, no longer respecting their elders. They do not realize that the habit of talking too much without listening makes others feel unvalued in their presence. Listening is not just sitting quietly while someone speaks. It is an active choice, a way to show care, respect, and a willingness to walk alongside someone's emotions. When an elderly person learns to pause and listen without interrupting, without dismissing, without turning every story into their own, they create a safe space where children, grandchildren, friends, and family can truly connect, truly want to share, truly want to return. The elderly may no longer have the strength or social roles they once had, but they still have a precious gift, the ability to make others feel understood. And that comes not from telling stories, but from listening sincerely, without judgment, without taking over the conversation. If an elderly person can relearn the habit of listening, starting by asking others about their lives, giving space for them to speak, genuinely caring about their feelings. They will be amazed at the change. Children will want to talk more, grandchildren will visit more often, and relationships that seem distant will slowly warm again. Never underestimate the power of a nod, an attentive gaze, or a short question born of genuine care. These are the bridges that help the elderly hold on to their closest relationships as life slows down. In old age, you do not need to say much to be heard. Sometimes, you just need to step back in a conversation to let others step in, and that is enough to keep them by your side longer. Habit 7. Refusing help. One of the most common but rarely discussed traits in the elderly is refusing help from others. At first glance, it might seem like independence, a mark of strength and self-reliance, but in reality, it often hides a cycle of isolation that leaves people lonelier, weaker, and more vulnerable than they realize. Refusing help is not always about pride. It is often a mix of fear, of being a burden, and a sense of losing control over life. Many elderly people have spent their lives caring for others, supporting families, being the pillar. When old age arrives, they find themselves no longer in that role, and instead of embracing a new one, they reject it by trying to do everything alone, even when they lack the strength. Refusing help can start small. Not letting grandchildren carry bags despite trembling hands, declining a ride to the doctor despite a long journey, or hiding signs of declining health to avoid worrying others. But those small acts, repeated over time, send a silent message to those around them. I do not need anyone. And when that message is clear enough, people start to believe it. That is how many elderly people push themselves into isolation. They think they are protecting their dignity, but in truth, they are closing the last doors to connection with family, friends, and community. Not everyone understands that a refusal does not mean a lack of need, but sometimes just a way to shield a hurting sense of self. But if this continues, those who love them will stop offering help, not because they do not want to, but because they fear rejection, fear causing more pain. The tragedy is that this refusal does not just affect relationships. It directly impacts the elderly person's quality of life and health. No one can live safely, fully, or happily without some support. Risks like falls, exhaustion, delayed medical care, or simply a lack of social interaction all grow worse when someone insists on managing alone. Accepting help is not a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it is an act of courage. It requires trust, letting go of ego, and most importantly, acknowledging that you deserve to be loved, cared for, and valued. Support from family, neighbors, or the community is not a debt. It is the natural flow of love and responsibility between people. When an elderly person accepts help, they create a chance for others to express their care. And in that exchange, they nurture a sense of connection, of being seen, of being present. If you are entering old age, try rethinking it. Not I am weak, so I need help, but I am loved, so I deserve this help. You do not need to prove your strength. True strength sometimes comes from bowing your head, opening your heart, and saying, I need you, because a hand extended can only be held when the other hand is ready to open. Habit 8. Hoarding money. Instead of living, saving is a virtue. Everyone agrees, especially those who have lived through tough times when saving was not a choice but a survival instinct. But what few realize is that saving, if not examined, can easily become an invisible cage, trapping the final years of life that should be lived with ease, joy, and fullness. It is not uncommon for elderly people to live frugally, even when they have enough savings to live without worry. They skip outings, avoid replacing a sagging mattress, refuse to buy new pajamas, or hesitate to call a plumber because it still works. They hold on to money, possessions, and old habits, not because they lack, but because they fear loss. That fear is not always obvious. It slips into thoughts. What if I get sick tomorrow? What if my children or grandchildren need it? What if the economy collapses? What if I live to 90 and run out of money? And so they begin to postpone living, postpone joy, postpone experiences, always waiting for a day that has not yet come. The sad truth is, when that day arrives, many no longer have the health, clarity, or opportunity to enjoy anything, and what they guarded so fiercely ends up as just numbers in a bank account or items no one uses anymore. Money is not wrong. Saving is not wrong. But living as if you're not allowed to spend on your own happiness is worth rethinking. Elderly people might think living simply is a sacrifice for their children or grandchildren, but in truth, when they allow themselves to live fully, they teach the next generation a greater lesson than any advice, that life is for enjoying, not just enduring. That money is not just for keeping, but for making the final years more meaningful. A trip somewhere, a nice meal with old friends, a comfortable chair by the window for reading each afternoon, these small things can nourish the spirit, making the elderly feel they are still living, not just counting days. And one more thing, being generous with yourself also opens you to others. The more you fear spending, fear loss, the more you close your heart. You hesitate to invite friends over, to go out with someone, to join the community, and slowly you shrink into a small, sealed world with no way out. All because of a vague worry. What if I need it and it is gone? But the paradox is, the more you cling, the more you lose the ability to feel joy. The elderly do not need to spend recklessly, but they need to know they deserve to enjoy life with dignity. They have worked their whole lives, cared for others their whole lives, and now no one forbids them from smiling over a good meal, resting on a soft mattress, or using money for things that make them feel truly alive. Money is not the problem, but fearing to live because you fear losing money is to lose a lifetime. Old age is a gift from time, but that gift only holds meaning if we know how to cherish it, live it fully, and not unknowingly lose it to habits that seem harmless. Throughout this journey, we have explored 8 silent but dangerous habits, from becoming negative and impatient to refusing help and saving so much you forget to live for yourself. These habits do not just strain familiar relationships, do not just make children and grandchildren withdraw or loved ones avoid you, they also deeply harm the quality of life for the elderly themselves. When someone no longer wants to listen, no longer accepts change, no longer lets anyone close, they are not just lonely in their heart, they are lonely even among those who love them most. These habits are not merely behaviors. They are signs of a closed heart, a fear of losing control, a feeling of no longer being needed. And in that closing off, they slowly drift away from the vibrant connections of family, community, and life itself. But what is even scarier is that this isolation does not just make them sad. It erodes mental health, weakens memory, raises the risk of depression, and even directly affects immunity and lifespan. People do not age because of years, but because they stop living in connection. Thankfully, it is never too late. Everything we have discussed, if you see yourself in it, is not meant to make you sad, but to show you that you still have a chance to change. A small change is enough to unlock something big. You start listening more, soften your edges a bit, open up to technology, accept help when needed, or simply allow yourself to live joyfully, beautifully, fully. You do not need to strain to prove your strength or close yourself off to avoid troubling others. What those who love you want is to see you live lightly, peacefully, and happily in your old age. So, if today's content has touched something in you, please leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Not so I know what you are thinking, but so you can send a message to others that I am ready to live better, starting today. And if you found this video valuable, do not forget to like it to help it reach more people who might need a gentle nudge to awaken. Subscribe to the channel if you want to continue this journey with me, seeking peace, calm, and true happiness in every remaining year of life. Because sometimes, just one moment of looking back, slowing down, and daring to change can show you that old age is not an ending, but the deepest, warmest, and most beautiful part of life if you live it right.